Winter has a special kind of vibe, a special energy. You know, it's warm, it's cozy, sometimes it's cold, it's scary, other times it's funny. And in this video, we'll be talking about each of those things. 6 of the best movies set in winter. No holiday, Christmas, Thanksgiving, whatever movies allowed. It's just winter settings, great movies. Let's get into it. First up, we have Groundhog Day. Every February 2nd, every year, the dead of winter, what's a better movie to start this list off with than Groundhog Day? The director, Harold Ramis, he originally actually wanted Tom Hanks for the lead role, but he decided that Tom Hanks was too nice to play the role. But it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows after that. Murray and Ramis had a lot of issues during the filming of Groundhog Day. What's funny is Harold said, I quote, that Bill Murray was irrationally mean and unavailable during the filming of Groundhog Day. Bill Murray was also, he's bitten twice by the groundhog while they were shooting, which required Bill Murray to get anti-rabies injections. There's one scene where Bill improvised the line, "Don't drive angry, don't drive angry," to cover up the groundhog's aggression, I guess. Now, this is one interesting fact I didn't know about until I was doing the research for this, which is the exact duration of Phil's time in this loop. It's debated, and I didn't know it was debated. I thought it was clear that it just was a handful of days, like what we were seeing on screen. But apparently, Harold Ramis, the director, claims it was 10 years that Phil was in this loop. But the writer of the film, Danny Rubin, believed it could have been up to 10,000 years. But there's only 38 days that are actually depicted in the film, and that's just what I thought it was. I thought it was a 38-day loop. Apparently, it could be 10 years or it could be 10,000 years. If it takes you 10,000 years to learn a lesson, bruh. Up next, Fargo. The Coen brothers actually shot Fargo primarily in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and in northern Minnesota. And they filmed it during a actually unusually warm winter where there was very minimal snowfall. And that's how we got kind of that look where everything is just, you can just barely see the grass coming up out of the snow, which was very unusual. They wanted it deeper, but they didn't get it. The Coens initially told the entire cast and crew. Now, this is what was most interesting to me, okay? Was we've all heard the lie and the thing and all the stuff. Fargo was a true story, this and that, blah, blah, blah. But it got distorted over time, and this was the truth. And I found this out when I was doing the research, which is, where did the lie come from? It came from the Coen brothers, but it came because they initially told the entire cast that it was a true story. It wasn't until after 3 weeks of shooting that they eventually revealed and said, like, hey, this is actually an entirely fictional story. It's all fake. And so it initially came from them, which is so fun that it like poured into the zeitgeist of people and all the things. And then the whole, there's that also fake story about that girl looking for the money. And up next is The Thing. One of the coolest and like interesting facts about The Thing is that all the sound stages, like all the sets that they built, those areas were kept refrigerated to simulate Antarctic conditions, and they kept it freezing. Temperatures in the sound stages, in the sets that they made, were maintained to be around 42 degrees, which is actually quite cold. Along with it being super cold, they wanted it very humid in there as well, so you can get that extra, so you can really see your breath really clear. The way they did this was they got burlap sacks and they filled them with water, and then they would hang them all around so that it just got super cold, super muggy. And I just think it's rad that they would, I mean, those, you don't see that kind of stuff anymore, which is so cool that they used to go to like these super great lengths because you didn't have the CGI to rely on, so you created it on screen, on set, and it just is rad that they did it like this. The Thing initially, if you didn't know, was a commercial and critical flop. People didn't like it, and it is, I think it's my favorite horror movie of all time, which is crazy. But a lot of the blame is put on the fact that it was released right around the same time as E.T. Most of the exterior Antarctic scenes were actually shot in the middle of summer with a lot of the crew members working without shirts in about like 60-degree weather. So all of the actors and everybody else on screen wearing their jackets and stuff is actually super freaking hot, which is kind of fun to think. And lastly, Kurt Russell almost killed himself in the filming of The Thing. The dynamite that he throws was actually a real stick of dynamite, and he really did get blown back. Up next is a movie that if I didn't include it in the best winter movies of all time, I don't know, I'd be crazy. And that is The Empire Strikes Back. The Hoth scenes were filmed during Norway's worst snowstorm in half a century, and the temperatures would often plummet to 38 degrees below Fahrenheit. So freezing. That's what they were filming in. Crew members, they experienced frostbite, and one of them broke 2 ribs while filming, slipping on some ice. Camera equipment was constantly freezing and breaking as they tried to film in this freezing cold temperatures, which is just, like I said, you don't get this kind of stuff anymore. It's not as crazy, it's not as extreme. And I just love hearing these kinds of stories of people really grinding, people really putting in the work, right? We're not just on some set green screen, you know, we're not doing that. We're making it happen in camera. And the last thing that's kind of cool is that they needed extras to be on the mountain, and they used the Norwegian mountain rescue skiers to be extras for the rebel troops on Hoth, which is rad. Real quick, my name is Austin Kohler. I have studied, watched, and I have reviewed over 10,000 hours of film. Storytelling is extremely important to me. I think it's one of the best ways that we can communicate and that we can connect with one another. And I think it is very important to be able to analyze and tell the difference between good and bad stories. If you feel similarly, please subscribe. Up next, The Revenant. The temperatures during filming would drop as low as 29 degrees below Fahrenheit, which is very cold. Not as cold as Empire Strikes Back, but still very cold. And in that freezing cold weather, the crew had to travel an hour and a half to their different locations, and then they had to hike in with all of the different gear onto the different locations that they were shooting at. Also, if you didn't know, the entire movie is shot entirely with natural light. There's no fake lights, it's just the sun and the moon and the stars, and that's it. And that is crazy to think, because it would have really shrunk it. All you have are these very, very specific, very short windows of time to try and get the scenes that you're trying to get. Also, during production, they were forced to shut it down for 3 full months due to unpredictable winter weather. Leonardo DiCaprio has considered this to be his hardest film that he has ever worked on. The film was also shot chronologically in order. What that does is just creates these really difficult continuity errors, because if this is your story and at the beginning of it you are on this location and then you go do an intervention and then you're back at this location, it has to look the same. But because normally when you're shooting, you shoot these scenes at the same time, but because it was shot chronologically, this was shot obviously with all the stuff in the middle, so they had to make this time look the same as this time, which would have caused a ton of issues. Up next is Hateful Eight. Hateful Eight was shot at 9,600 feet above sea level in Telluride, Colorado. It was also filmed during a very unpredictable winter where the crew was constantly waiting for snow. So this is a little bit different from the rest of the ones. You know, we just got off Hoth, where it's crazy freezing, The Revenant, where it's unbelievably freezing and all this snow and all this stuff. Tarantino had to deal with a little bit of a different issue where it's the middle of winter. He went to Telluride because it gets a ton of snow and they weren't getting any snow. And when you're watching it, and if you're paying attention, you can see it. It doesn't look like it's supposed to be this huge storm is coming in, all this stuff, and it's supposed to be wild and crazy, and it doesn't feel like it. And that was always not a big gripe for me, but it was always something that I picked up on and I noticed from my very first watching, where I was like, well, it doesn't feel very snowy. Like, this doesn't feel very dangerous. And apparently that was a big issue and a big frustration for Quentin Tarantino, feeling like, yo, dude, it's not snowing. Like, this isn't what I want. It needs to be even crazier. It's interesting to kind of see that truth play out on screen. Now, what's also interesting is Tarantino originally thought of The Hateful Eight as a sequel to Django Unchained, which I did not know. He used a Ultra Panavision 70mm film format, which had not been used since the 1960s. And what's cool about that is it required a bunch of rebuilding and refurbishing of vintage 70mm projectors from the olden days for special screenings, which I always enjoy stuff like that. And when it released, there were actually only 100 theaters that were able to screen the 70mm version because of all of the old tech that needed to be brought to life, which is rad. Patreon.com/Austin Kohler. Right now, the collaborator tier over on Patreon, where you get a write into the show like this or the other videos that I make, it's free for 7 days. So you can head over there, you can write me a line, drop me a comment, and I will read your comments in my upcoming videos as they pertain to the different videos, different content that I make. You can subscribe here or click here for more videos. Thank you for watching my video, and I'll see you in the next one.